Hello, and welcome back to the Emerge Stronger podcast. We are all together. I am here with my co-hosts, Erin, Melody, and Priscilla. We are so excited to bring this podcast to you today. It's a special podcast because, like I said, we're all together. And so we are going to talk about, Melody, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about why you shouldn't cut people out of your life. So many times when we get angry or for whatever reason, we will decide that we're just going to cut them out. And really, that's kind of what the culture of the world is today. If you don't like somebody anymore, or if y'all have a falling out, you just cut them out. So we're going to talk about why you shouldn't do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Priscilla, I think that it would be really cool for you to share the story that you were sharing earlier, just to get us started.
Yeah. Okay. So I was trying to think about the time in my life when I started to realize, like, hey, the best way to approach relationships, especially difficult relationships, is not to cut people out. It's to actually have hard conversations. It's to get through it, to work through it. And I started thinking about one pivotal conversation that my mom and I had. It was when I have 6 children and the oldest 2 are twins. And as you can imagine, like, I was a brand new mom with 2 little babies, and my mom and I disagreed on parenting. And I know that is just so crazy to think that, moms are going to know or think they know how to raise their kids better than you. And first time mom, I thought, oh, no, I know all the things that are best. But anyway, we were having this disagreement. And the way that it kind of started to evolve was my mom was just assuming, well, we're disagreeing, so we're going to just kind of part ways. We're going to take some time apart. And I thought, wait a second. What? No, that's not what I was wanting. That's not what I was trying to say. And so I said, no, like, that's not how it's going to happen. Like, we're going to have this conversation. We're going to have a hard conversation. And then we're going to continue to choose to love each other and work through this. And it was just kind of a shocker, even, I think, for my mom. And I started to think back at that time, like, oh, that was the pattern of behavior in our family all these years. Like, we would, have times where we were spending time with my grandparents, and all of a sudden we weren't around my grandparents for several months or maybe even longer. And then there were times when we were around certain family members, and then we weren't around those family members for a while. And then, like, all of a sudden something would happen and we would be back around those family members. And so I just realized, oh, that had been a generational pattern that my mom had experienced. And that's kind of what we were going to start to do in our family too, until in my early 20s, which was quite a while with that. Like, I said, no, like, that's not how we're going to handle these family relationships. And so we did. We had the hard talk. We had the hard conversation. We dealt with the frustration, and we still love each other and loved each other then, but we love each other now too. So anyway, that was just the pivotal moment when I realized, no, the way to handle hard relationships or even hard conflict is not to walk away.
Yeah. So Erin, why do you think we shouldn't cut people out of our lives?
Well, the most important reason to not cut people out of your life is because for me, in this particular story, like, your kids, you don't want to teach them to do that, because you're going to be a grandmother one day. You know what I'm saying? And I think that people think about the immediate moment and making their self happy and fixing their problem, that they don't think about their future. If they're going to have grandkids, they're going to have, daughter-in-laws and son-in-laws and things like that. And just building relationship, it's so important.
Yeah.
It's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. I think it's important to have boundaries, right? Like, so we're not saying don't have boundaries, but we're also saying it's not okay. And I don't want to use the word fair, but I would never want, like, if my mom and I, had a disagreement, to take my children away from her just because my mom and I are having a disagreement.
Yeah.
And so I think there's just ways that we're not saying, like, you have to spend all this time together or anything like that. But I would never not want my children to know really anybody that I love or that I'm close to because of my feelings towards them or because of my disagreement.
Absolutely.
And I feel like it really is cutting people out a form of control. Like, if you don't believe the way I believe, if you don't think the way I think, or if we can't even choose to get along, then I'm going to control the situation, just cut you out. And Jesus is about reconciliation, right? I mean, I have used the story of the prodigal son so many times, and yes, the father did not go run after the son, but the second that the son came to himself, changed his mind, the father ran out and met him. And so Jesus is he came to reconcile us to the Father, right?
Yeah.
And so cutting people out of your life, it is kind of a form of control and saying, if you don't do it my way, then you're out of here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what Jesus would want us to do.
Yeah. And I think it's important too, is like to look at the person and, ask some questions. Like what was the issue? You know what I'm saying? That, did your mom think that you weren't doing something the way that
I wasn't
she
taking care
did
of
it?
children babies the way that
she would have?
No, the way that she parented was not at all the way she was asking me to parent.
Oh,
Yeah. Oh, okay. No, she was wanting me to be a lot more coddling and a lot more, attentive than she was.
do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because those were her grandbabies now.
Yeah.
So like it's different when it's your babies versus your grandbabies.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah.
No.
So what's the dynamic now with your mom? How did you guys get through that? How did you work through that conversation to say like, look, no, I'm not saying we're not going to talk anymore.
Yes.
Let's open
Well,
up.
what's funny is we had to just work through the awkward because it was awkward at times. And it was, like, okay, what can I say? What can't I say? And so we just had to talk through that awkward where it was just, okay, here's the boundary. Like you were saying, we had to have boundaries. Like, when it's coming to training them to sleep, like I get to have the say. Like if it's grandmother time, then you get to have the say, like it was just a matter of having those hard conversations and continuing to show up even through the awkward.
Yeah.
And, like you were talking about boundaries, because like that's exactly what we're saying. We're not saying that you have just relationships without any kind of boundaries. Boundaries are healthy in all relationships. And some relationships do require stronger boundaries. Like if for instance, there's somebody who is physically dangerous, like we're going to have a strong boundary. And I know that maybe it sounds like, or maybe looks like you're cutting that person out of your life, but I think that the way that we frame it matters. So no, like I'm not cutting that person out of my life so much as it's just, I have to have a strong boundary because they're going to cross over that boundary. Like they're not going to like do well with, us meeting in person. They could physically be dangerous to me. And so like, I'm going to have a bigger boundary. Or if they're, verbally abusive, then maybe I'm not able to speak to that person without having a third party there. Having boundaries is really important, which we never had to get to that in that relationship with my mom. It was more so just that, we had to continue to choose to show up when it was awkward, continue to have hard conversations, continue to share, because that was another thing was we were tempted to just kind of keep the peace because neither one of us really like conflict. And so we were tempted to just kind of keep the peace and we're not going to speak up what we think or feel. And then we had to choose to work against that too. And like, okay, you still can share what you think and feel, but I'm not going to change my behavior necessarily because you think and feel that way, and vice versa. Like I still get to parent how I want to parent, even if you think differently on that.
Yeah.
So
I have one quick story to share about that. And I mean, as you're talking, like this story is popping up in my head. It's with a family member, and this family member, like my husband and I, and even the kids just don't agree with his lifestyle and just the choices that he made. And even to the point where he kind of went down a road of, I don't like anybody in my family. I don't need anybody. And so there was a period of time where we just didn't speak. And it was not because we were like, we're not talking to you.
Yeah.
It was more kind of him distancing himself. And we just had to give him time.
Yeah.
So time passed, let's just say 2 years passed. And he recently reached out to us and he was like, hey, I'm coming through town. Would you guys like to grab dinner? And we're like, absolutely. We would love to grab dinner. And I just remember feeling in that moment all the really bad things he said about us. And it was sad and it was hurtful. But at the same time, all I wanted to do was just like show up and love him. And it was like the most beautiful interaction. And now he's in contact with my husband. And it's just giving an opportunity to foster that relationship. But also he grew during those 2 years and we grew during those 2 years. And so just to be able to open up and at one point in time, it was like, no, we want nothing to do with you and kind of I'm going to cut them out of my life. But when you were saying that, I thought of that story.
Yeah, it's so good.
So there's times when I've had people tell me, that person triggers me. you know?
Mhm.
And I get that. I mean, we can show up
Absolutely.
as not being the best version of ourselves and all of that. But the only way to really disarm a trigger is to face it.
That's
Right. Running from it, avoiding it, none of that's going to work. And so when somebody tells me they're triggered, I'm like, well, so what?
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
if you want the relationship or if you want to live as the best version of yourself, you got to face that and move forward instead of running from it every single time.
That's right. Because
Yeah.
triggers are not bad.
Mhm.
Triggers are just kind of alerting us to, hey, there's a little piece in there that needs to be healed.
Mhm.
Or maybe there's a really big piece in there that needs to be
Yeah.
healed. So
Mhm.
triggers themselves are not bad.
You also have to be careful, though, when you do get triggered, where your thoughts take you, because it
Mhm.
could lead you down to a dangerous path.
Absolutely.
That was one of the things whenever me and my husband were separated, you know, he did a lot of things with his LO that we had done before. And so when we got back together, we started doing some of the same things. And I remember feeling triggered about it. And then I thought, you know, it's not the movies, you know, that theaters that it's not their fault, you know, you know. And so I went back and I was sharing this with you last night and just said, I'm going to start reclaiming that. You know? And so the only way to face it is to actually, you know,
Absolutely.
go through it.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
When is it okay? Is it okay? Is there ever a time it's okay to cut somebody out?
See, I think that for me, it's a matter of framing it in a helpful way. Because is it ever helpful to say, oh, I'm just going to cut them out of my life? Like the way that we process it in our brain matters. So I really think that it matters the way that we frame it, because the way that we think matters, the way that we process matters. And so, you know, saying, oh, is it ever okay to cut somebody out of our lives? I don't like that wording, because I don't think that's helpful wording. I think the better wording would be, I've got to have stronger boundaries. So like, you know, people that commit certain serious crimes, the boundary is that they are in isolation, that they are behind bars. So I believe that boundaries and thinking of it as boundary setting is a way more helpful way to process it. So again, maybe it's potatoes, but I think that the way that we think matters.
And to make sure that the window of like you're still open to reconciliation. You know, when I was younger, I was sexually abused by a family member, and the daughter of that family member was posting pictures of them. And so I just shut down, you know, and just said, I'm just going to unfriend for now, you know, because I don't want to see that all the time. And anyway, long story short, she found out about it, went off, started posting all kinds of stuff on social media. And I just said, you know what? It's fine. She can do whatever she wants. And then just a couple of months ago, she reached out and apologized and all that. And it was really towards me and my sister. So we both kind of embraced her and said, hey, we love you. You know, you're not the one that did the things. And we understand that would be difficult for me to accept as well. You know, that my father would do something like that. So I think it's okay to have the boundary when it's appropriate, especially if there's lots of, I don't know, verbal abuse or whatever's going on, but also be open to reconciliation. If there's a true heart change.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say was if they're open to apologizing, because I feel like whenever you cut someone off because of a certain behavior, you cutting them off is just as bad of a behavior that keeps a wall up and makes it to where if they were to come to their senses, so like in your situation, like with your mom, if you were to say, fine, you know, if you don't respect my parenting, you know, I'm going to cut you off, that would put this wall up to where she wouldn't, if she did go, you know, Priscilla was right, those are for kids, it would have been, she would have felt safe to come back and say, hey, you know, I'm sorry. So to respond in a way like you just described is so much better.
Absolutely.
You can still protect yourself, but keep that door open.
Yeah. That's so good.
And two, I think it helps them to maybe realize, like, if they are in the wrong quicker.
Absolutely.
Than if you
rejection.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it kind of goes back to like acceptance. Like acceptance is something that helps people to grow a whole lot better than control, or a whole lot better than shutting them down. Like is it in Romans where it talks about, isn't it the kindness of God that leads us to repentance? So how about if we're kind to people, isn't that going to be a much better path for people to repent? Or, is it going to be us saying, nope, you can't come back unless you do this? How's that going to work out for us?
Right.
Because I mean, you guys know my story, and, I'm sure that eventually, we'll share more about
The world will know.
Yeah. Well, the world does know in some ways, but anyway, but saying that, just when I started to come back, like I had faced a lot of rejection and a lot of, people basically saying, unless you change, you're not acceptable to us. Well, did that ever make me want to go back and be accepted by them? No, absolutely not. Like it made me, and actually I was talking to somebody today about that because she was asking, well, how did you feel about the way that some people handled that? And I was like, was very angry because at that time, like actually when people were softer to me, it made me want to do right and want to change. But the more people would stand against me and say, basically, you're going to hell, I would feel like, absolutely not. Like, I'm going to do what I want to do then. And so anyway, it's the kindness of God that leads us to repentance. So I believe it's the kindness of people that also lead others to repentance versus I'm going to reject you until you do what I think, like you said, control.
The other aspect is you might be in the wrong and so is the other person.
Right.
And so, there's been many times when if I've had some type of conflict with a person, when I was younger, it was always the other person's fault. But as I've gotten older, I'm like, you know what? I'm probably the villain in this story too, in some capacity.
Yeah.
So I need to check myself first and before I start pointing the fingers at everybody else, and then learn to, accept and own what I have done and then forgive the other person for what they've done.
Yeah.
I don't think that a lot of people just aren't self-aware enough or even have just kind of the emotional intelligence to look at themselves in the mirror and even question, why is this happening? How did we get here? What did I do to contribute to this? To really look inward. And so you're absolutely right saying that, like, sometimes it is us, but we have to kind of set some of those emotions aside for a second and speak some truth to ourselves. And sometimes that's really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the value of having a third, a friend or coach or somebody to speak some truth into you sometimes, because sometimes we are so emotional about a situation. It's really hard for us to see clearly.
Yeah.
But and it's not that we're trying to take ownership of anybody else's behavior, but like, how did I contribute to the dynamic? We can absolutely take ownership for how we contributed to that dynamic.
Yeah.
So.
I have a client right now, and him and his partner, she started seeing somebody else, and it wasn't exactly a cheat thing, but it was like it was really close. And he owned, like, he really did own his part in the breakup, and he would like to reconcile. But he goes through these moments of, he seems very loving and compassionate towards her. And then other moments, he's just so spiteful and like, why would you be with this guy? And, all this kind of stuff. And, so we'll have conversations and I'm like, man, don't let your pride be the thing that ruins this. Right. Because it stinks, and I know it stinks, and it's sometimes doesn't seem fair. But if you're saying, I'm better than this guy, and I'm, and she's this or she's that because she's not seeing it, it's just like, you got to let her go through her own journey, and just because she's not where you're at, you can't fault her for that, And I mean, there is a little bit of an age gap as well, but I'm always saying, don't let your pride be the reason why, y'all don't make it work.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. That's good.
I think too, a lot of people, they don't understand the importance of relationship. And I actually heard a podcast not too long ago where it was someone who was supporting cutting someone out. Like, here, let me help you do it. These are the reasons why you need to do it. And it was so self-focused, self-absorbed. Like, if someone's toxic and they're keeping you from moving forward, or if they're, if they don't agree with, the vision that you have for your life and all the things, you walk away so that they don't hold you back. Those people hold you back in life. And I was just honestly blown away at what people encourage other people to do, because I was like, wow, if a lot of people have that what's the word, motivation for success or for, whatever it is. And if the wrong person heard it could really lead to a dead end road, honestly, like loneliness, all of the things.
Yeah. And that's people. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Well, it's just that it's people putting the power for their life into somebody else's hands.
Yes.
So it's like, if you're saying, okay, that person can hold me back, then you got some things to do within you, because if you're allowing somebody to hold you back, then that, like, you're giving them the power to do that.
And if you are going to get somebody else's advice and they're like, hey, cut them out. Well, they don't have to live with the consequences of that decision. You do.
That's
so
right.
That's why you seek wise counsel, but really you check your belief system. What does my belief system says is right outside of the pride, outside of the pain? What does my belief system say? And if you follow that, you're going to hit the target much better than if you start, well, so-and-so said I should, and so-and-so said I should do that. Just not a good idea to do that.
No. And how often, like, does our life change so quickly?
Yeah.
It's like the way that my life is today and the problems that I have today are not going to be the problems that I have in 6 months from now or a year from now. And if you make decisions, like permanent, like decisions on cutting people out, it's not healthy.
Yeah. Well, and like you were saying, like, I think sometimes people don't understand the value of relationships until you're lonely, until you have cut them all out. And that's the thing. If we go through life and we're just cutting out people that are difficult, first of all, we'd have to cut ourselves out, because, like, I feel like I'm probably one of the most difficult people that I have to deal with. But anyway, but yeah, and so, like, we're going to be cutting so many people out, and we're never going to build those deep, long-lasting relationships with anybody, because, like, you can't build those relationships without conflict, without, facing hard things together or working through issues together, which I know my mom and I were closer because I grew up, like, she's, the person I've known the longest in my life. But that, I think, strengthened our relationship, deepened our relationship because of being able to work through conflict. And so, yeah, like, I think that, like you were saying, they don't understand the value of relationship until at some point in their life when they're all alone because they've cut everyone out that's difficult. And like I said, I can't really cut myself out. So,
based upon attachment theory, we are hardwired for relationships.
Hardwired.
So if you cut everybody out, then you have no roots that run deep.
Yeah.
Right?
I want to go back to something you said really quick. Okay. You were talking about, oh, they're toxic. Oh, they're this. Oh, they're that. I think that's another thing that we're seeing a lot of right now, which everybody's toxic. Everybody's a narcissist. Everybody's gaslighting somebody else. And you really have to be careful that, number one, you understand what those terms actually mean.
That's right.
And you be careful on how you use them, because I can promise you not everybody's toxic.
Nope.
And that's the way that you're perceiving them to be. It's the way that you're choosing to view them in that way. And so truly ask yourself, what does it mean to be toxic?
Yeah.
Well, and most of the time when someone's using it, it's because they're not getting their way. And another thing that is huge right now is everyone wants everything that's easy. And a lot of times relationships are hard. Conflict is hard.
Yeah.
And it's easier to walk away from it than it is to just have a conversation or to just confront it. Yeah. And I mean, I just, like you said, like, people need to think about it, because the consequences are in the days to come, not in the moment.
That's right. That's right. It may feel, what is it? Instant gratification. Instantly you feel gratified. And then down the road, it's like, oh man, I'm suffering and I don't know why. What's going on? Well, it's because, like, you have no friends or you have no family left. Yeah. And so, because that, like, loneliness is a really big deal. Like, it, I think even in a culture or in a world where we have so much connection or so many ways that we can connect, like, we are feeling more lonely today than we ever have. And so anyway, loneliness is serious, and it causes a lot of other issues as well.
Yeah. Well, it also, are you lonely because you're the victim?
Yeah.
And then you kind of get into that victimhood mentality, and you become the victim of all your circumstances, and it's always everybody else's fault. And again, it goes back to taking accountability and being self-aware.
That's right.
And how many times, like, when you've had a disagreement with somebody, have you gone back and just said, okay, this hurt me calmly. This hurt me when you said this, and it made me feel this way or whatever. I mean, how many times was your perception off? And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I made you feel that way. I didn't mean to. This is what I actually meant. And then you're like, oh, okay. So we immediately jump to the worst of, of what somebody might say.
Yeah.
And then you find out later that's not what they thought at all.
Yeah.
It changes your perception.
Erin and I were just talking about this the other night in our church group, in our Wednesday night group, and just how, you were kind of giving the example of you and your husband's like, that's not at all what I meant or what I said or how I meant to make you feel like, but we kind of sit, and sometimes we sit in an emotional state, and then we're just like coming up with all of these things that aren't true.
They're not true.
Yeah.
We've gotten in a good habit of saying something and then saying, what did you hear me say? And most of the time it's like, no, let me find the words.
Yeah.
Let me clarify.
One of our coaches, her and I did a small group years ago, and she said, I could almost see when the words were leaving out of my mouth, how the devil would twist them and put them in my husband's ears, and she said, we would go back and forth. And so she said, Jesus, when I hear him speak, let me hear what he is speaking, not based upon my perception or my mood or even what the devil wants me to believe.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, that's good. So another thing that I think is helpful when we're talking about this topic of not cutting people out is that, like, our society is such a pain avoidant society. And so, one of the things that we are able to do when we're cutting people out of our lives that are causing us pain is build that emotional resilience, because I can't remember the exact wording, but it was something to the effect of emotional resilience is built kind of in a period of waiting. So it's between the pain point and the resolution of that pain. And so when we're cutting people out of our lives, like, we're not allowing ourselves to have that emotional resilience built. And so it's really helpful, again, to continue to work through the pain versus trying to run from the pain in relationships.
Pain is so good for us. I mean, even if we think of it in our physical bodies, we don't know anything is wrong. I mean, if we have cancer, we are going to eventually start feeling pain. If we don't feel the pain, then we're not ever going to know anything's wrong.
That's
right. And so pain is good. Now, there's always crossing over to too much pain, and, that's another discussion, but pain can be good. It serves as a catalyst for us to change who we are. I'm grateful for my pain.
I'm grateful for my pain.
Yeah. That I caused. The pain that I caused myself.
Yeah.
You learn so much from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we all would not be sitting here today had we not
felt
each one
pain.
of us.
You are so
felt
right.
pain.
For long periods of time.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, this has been a fun conversation, and I just love that we're all together. I wish we could do this every week, podcasting together, but we're just so excited to be able to share all of this with you. And if you are somebody that it has cut somebody out of your life, or, is thinking about cutting somebody out of your life, talk to us. We can help walk you through that and, just help you maybe establish some of those boundaries, or even decide, what does this relationship look like going forward? We would love to have a conversation with you. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Wow, what a conversation. We know this topic isn't easy. Navigating relationships, boundaries, and the tension between protecting your peace and pursuing reconciliation can feel messy and complicated. But you don't have to figure it out alone. We would love to hear your thoughts on this, whether you've been on the receiving end of being cut off, or you've struggled with deciding what to do in a difficult relationship. Go ahead and message us, comment, or share your story. This is a space for honest dialogue, healing, and growth. If this episode spoke to you, would you do us a favor and leave us a review, share it with a friend, post it to your socials, just to help more people find the show, and maybe hear exactly what they need to hear, right when they need it. Thanks again for being here, and we'll see you next week on the Emerge Stronger podcast.